get through the basic stuff. Hi. Morning. It's always especially difficult, I think, for the morning presentations, like the late evening presentations, and the afternoon immediately after lunch, right? Because you are at risk of people sleeping. That's why I will try to do it not too much, I would say technical, but rather from a little bit more of an exciting perspective of the user experience. So I'm Olga. I've been with NIO, the Chinese car company, originally Chinese, but actually global, let's say it like that, car company for the past 3 years. In August, it will be 3 years. So it's a car company, who doesn't know in case, based in Shanghai. We have quite big offices in some European cities, like Amsterdam, Berlin, and Munich, and I'm based in Munich, Germany. So here, you're about to meet Nomi, that little creature that you could have experienced or would be experiencing in NIO cars, is the voice assistant, but it's just much more than a voice assistant, like the one that you usually use in the car, which you all know, but that's also a voice assistant with a physical representation. And that's what NIO have been specialized about. It's part of NIO's DNA as being not only a software-defined vehicle, but also a user-defined vehicle. Let's get started. So basically here, I'm not about to make the publicity of the cars. I'm about to say that at NIO, we are redefining the product managers and the product in general into the experience. And I think it's pretty much of a trend right now, right, with many car brands and with many brands in general, right, that we started talking not about it's just our product and you are our consumers or users and you use the product, but it's about the experience. Experience meaning both the functional experience that you are doing while interacting with the product, but also the emotional experience, meaning which kind of feelings, which kind of memories you create while you are using the product. And we are talking about the long user journey, right? It's before you get in the car, while you are in the car, in different scenarios, and after the car. That's kind of has been our approach. And then basically here on this slide, you see this statement that I'm gonna get, right, from an interface to the companion. What does that mean, right? Originally, car manufacturers, many years ago actually, right, the voice assistants in the car have quite a history. In case many of you probably would have known it as like these IVR, very old systems where you could really like hit the 10 phrases and only those 10 phrases, otherwise it would not work. So actually the cognitive trust in those systems was not very high, right? You were trying hard, you were not succeeding, and after a while you were like, okay, let's wait for the next generation. Maybe my kids are going to use this system somewhere in the future, in 30 years. So it basically started as an interface, right? The other interface in the car was, of course, the physical user interface with all the buttons, which then started to move slowly towards the GUI, the graphical user interface. And then while the menus on the one hand have become much more elaborate, much more complicated, and on the other hand, the standards for driver safety have become much more developed too, that's where the voice user interface, the VUI, really hit it, right? People started to understand that through the voice, you can pack a lot of features which users can easily interact with or use during their drive without getting their cognitive load off the road. That's the one important thing, right? And on the other hand, using maybe some kind of complicated functions, right? We know that there is the first level menu, which is easy to get. You just hit the button, settings, you go in, right? But there are settings which are like second, third, fourth level, like very deeply buried. And we all know from the classics of the product management that hidden features are buried features. They do not exist because they have zero traction. So this has become a way for all car manufacturers, not just for us, right? To just get the features out there. Like, hey guys, in the release notes, like, did you know that you could do this by voice? You could do navigation by voice. You could do car control by voice. You could do media and entertainment, and you can check the weather. And that's where the interface started evolving and getting not only functional features, but more and more of the emotional charge, right? And nowadays, I think Nomi is very representative of the general thing happening on the Chinese market. I've heard yesterday also throughout the presentations, many people referring to China because it's an important EV market nowadays. And what is happening a lot in China, and of course less in Europe and the US, but it's also coming to the West, probably in a different form, that's this whole companionship thing, right? That people want not only to be entertained, but also to have fun in terms of connecting the car to the world, asking about the world, right? And here we come in the domain of large language models in the car, and then later on also AI agents in the car. That's how the shift brought us from voice to actually what we have today, which is much more than voice, right? In general, AI in the car, I'd like to summarize it to show which part conversational AI is actually playing, right? When we talk about AI in the car, here at this conference, people are specialized. So here mostly it would be ADAS systems or DMS, driver monitoring system, and this kind of stuff, predictive maintenance, probably some kind of battery stories that are also running on AI, right? But then what changed a lot recently, especially starting from the end of 2022, right, when LLMs, when ChatGPT hit the ground, people suddenly started to understand that it's not everything. We have conversational AI in the car, and starting from just chatting with the car, like chit chat, we go from only conversational AI towards everything where the text can be used in the car, right? It could be user experience that is enhanced. It could be the enhancement of the apps. It could be the productivity apps. It could be also the traffic prediction, because that is connected throughout navigation, apps, and the voice, route optimization, all of that. So basically, conversational AI nowadays is starting to define the in-cabin experience, I would say, right? Some people who are not from the business, they also always think, you guys have just one AI system. I've heard that at non-specialized conferences, because I'm also talking at non-vehicle conferences. People would be like, yeah, it's like ADAS is connected to those systems, to your voice assistant. Like, it's not connected in terms of the tech, but who knows? Maybe in the future it will be connected in terms of the experience. I've had a very interesting conversation with some of you guys on the first day during the icebreaker, right? When I think with you probably, right? That was it. Exactly. That the voice user interface can be used also for proactive announcement of the system. It can be connected with the ADAS. It can be connected with DMS, and that's what we are also partly doing. That's what's happening a lot on the Chinese market also. I think I will also get into it a little bit later. Basically, the question is always nowadays, I guess you've all asked it in your products, like, do we actually need AI? Not always, right? That's pretty much obvious. I like to put up this quote here. People want seamless experience. They don't come to you and say, I want to buy a car which has a lot of AI in it. It's no use, right? And from the product management perspective, I want a car that does lots of different things and does them smoothly without me really constantly switching between stuff. But actually, the voice is a good way of doing it, right? Because the voice gives you a possibility of not only doing everything with this information architecture of the menu, right? Which is a tree, basically, right? You open this menu, this here, go deeper into the app. It's different, right? You can just naturally express whatever you want, and you get access to the variety of features that the car manufacturer has prepared for them. So that's the one. And then, of course, it's a lot of scalability, and here specifically generative AI for the voice assistants, it gives you a possibility of scaling much faster. It's an entry point, as we mentioned, right, for the different knowledge parts, and of course, it's an enhanced driver safety. And one more point that you see here, impossible made possible, what does that mean? It's just before the tech got where it got today, certain things were not possible. Of course, you could potentially prepare with the natural language processing, I don't know, 500,000 questions about the world and let the car answer them. But would you do that? That would have made no sense, right? It's like creating ChatGPT without the tech behind it. It doesn't make any sense. So no one would actually do it. And there were no such expectations. People didn't even know it was possible. They didn't want it. Now it all changed. The impossible was made possible. People know that ChatGPT exists, that DeepSeek exists, that like Anthropic Claude exists, and then everyone is just ready to explore more. That's the positive thing with the voice assistants, but they have very high expectations, and that's the negative things, or negative, let's say, complicated thing for us who develop the voice assistants. So there has been a different paradigm on the market now, right? It's been a big shift. And to answer the questions, not always do users need AI, but they do more and more just because it's become impossible without, because there are too many user habits that have shifted after it came here. So the AI for us, and I believe it actually is for many other companies, it's another tool, a very powerful tool to support the product principles, right? That's why we at NIO always recommend from the product principle perspective, just see what's important and how can AI help here. For example, one of our product principles is know me, that's how we call it. That's why the know me name of the voice assistant, like know me in terms of personalization. Personalization has been a huge topic. It's a huge topic for very many consumer-oriented products, right? Also for B2B, but it's mostly a B2C story, and the car is a good example of it, right? Of course, you want to personalize your car because that's the journey you do every day if you commute, or maybe a couple of times a week if you just use the car occasionally. But that's been something super important. And sense of freedom. We want less limitations, and here AI helps a lot, of course. The ease, ultimate ease, that's what I've already mentioned before, right? The seamlessness of the experience. We also have this with the joy through all senses, and that is nothing else from the technical perspective as different modalities, right? Multimodality. It's been also a huge topic nowadays, where the voice user interface meets the graphical user interface, and in our case, that you've seen this little robotic head, so to say, that's also this emotional user interface, right? Which is kind of different screen. And of course, deep reassurance. Honestly, driver safety will never go away. You will never say, okay, I just need the voice assistant to have fun. Who cares about the safety? Not going to happen, of course. So it's always number one, right? Here, I wanted to show, it's, again, pretty much in many cars, the voice assistant normally sits with a cockpit domain controller, with a digital cockpit, whereas it is kind of dividing the experience in the car and the tech in the car between the ADAS, right, the smart gateway, so basically connectivity, the battery story, the VCU, and then, of course, the ECUs of the motor. So it all works together. Technically, these are different parts, but experience-wise, they can also be connected, and that's always to keep in mind. And what is, of course, cool about our vehicles and also other SDVs, that you can upgrade the experience via the SOTA and FOTA packages, right, over-the-air updates, and that's how it works. So basically, the voice assistant of ours gets updated together with lots of other parts, not only of DC, of the digital cockpit, but, for example, also for battery. So this way, you can also connect the experiences better. That's the basic architecture, how it actually looks like for us. I don't want to go into too many technical details. I just wanted to show you where there is AI and where there is generative AI, right? The voice assistants have pretty much always been AI products, right? As we remember those before that I mentioned earlier, which could probably just open the windows, but it's still AI, right? It was still the good old-fashioned AI with the speech recognition. So we have the wake-up word detection, which is a model, right? We have the automatic speech recognition, ASR, which is another model. We have the NLU, which has been the core of the voice assistants for all that time, right? Which actually makes sense of what you are saying, right? You could be saying, please open the window. Would you be so kind as to open the window? Why don't you open the window? These are different pieces of text, but the idea is the same. You want to open the window. And that is the basis of the voice assistant. And in case some of you have not been in the voice assistant business specifically, I'll surprise you, it's still there, right? With the arrival of ChatGPT and the large language model, we are not abandoning this because you don't only want this surprise effect, right? But you want the behavior to be predictive and predictable in certain domains, especially in the car domains. So it's still a big part. The model for the natural language understanding. As you see below, right, it's partly embedded, partly cloud, right, while the voice activity detection and the wake-up word is, of course, an embedded-only model. Most of the time in the voice assistant business, we work with the hybrid architecture, leveraging both the cloud and the head unit, the embedded. Of course, the head unit opportunities, so to say, are limited, right? Because as I said, on the digital cockpit, there are lots of other things, lots of other applications running, and then you don't want to jeopardize the others by the voice assistant, so you have to balance it pretty well to create a good experience. And then in the end, let's jump to the very end. Of course, we see the text-to-speech, right, which is another model. It's also a hybrid model. So if you are out of connectivity in a tunnel, and it happens a lot in Europe, happens much less in China. That's been my experience and the experience of my colleagues, right? Lots of coverage, internet coverage, connectivity coverage, and lots of cloud usage in China. In comparison, in Europe, for example, when we go down the office, right, to the garage, -1, -2 levels, you're done, basically, right? You have to rely on the embedded, and it has to be good enough. Not that good, as it would be with the cloud, but still it has to have a decent experience. You don't want to hear, I don't understand you, all the time when you are in a tunnel. or in a parking garage underneath. And then here, so I've talked about all the elements, and if you noticed, the one that I haven't touched yet is the action, as we call it, or the DM, the dialogue manager, the skill, the core system, you can call it, right? It used to be basically just rule-based, and we are still using it, and lots of voice assistants still do, right? So we recognize what the user wants, and based on it, we program the behavior in the very classical way, right? If the user wants to open the window, it's not that there are so many options, right? We map, for example, which user it was, because we have different microphone zones, right? We map that, okay, that was the co-driver. We check whether the window was open already, not open yet. Depending on it, we have certain variations, but not so many, and then we just do it. So this is for the classical domains. We still do it a lot in the car control domain. We do it a lot in the entertainment and media domain. We do it in phone, navigation, small things like weather. But then, as I said, of course, people started to want to chat with the cars, right? And you don't want to chat where you have a limited set of opportunities and each opportunity is just programmed. That's how people started, right? You still remember those older but not so old voice assistants, right, where the shift started to go from just opening the windows towards, hey, tell me a joke. But still, tell me a joke, it's also mostly a use case that presumes just the natural language understanding, which is AI, and then no AI because you have a database of jokes, right, which are polished, not to be racist or anything, right, to be polite and good to go. Mostly not super funny. I can tell you from my experience, it's super difficult to find a joke which is good for the car because like 99% of the jokes just go off because something is wrong with them. Anyway, at a certain point you want to scale, and that's where LLM comes in, right? That's what we started to work on early 2023, when the whole thing got on the market. We started to experiment with this, and then I think it was April 24 when we got those first features on the market, and then there are other car companies which already started to do it now too, right? And here we have endless options, right? You can do the chit-chat with the car, you can do the trivia questions, especially good for like when you have kids, for example, or you have a long drive from San Francisco to whatever, someone is driving to New York from San Francisco, probably not, but like even drive to LA, right? You might want to communicate with the car and not constantly check things on your phone. Those are the fun cases, but of course there are the useful cases. For example, the car manual, right? Everyone knows the car manual. Who thinks it's a fun thing to read through? I hope no one. Stay with me here, please, but if there are enthusiasts, I understand. But honestly, if I want to know something from the user manual, it's not something you do with great pleasure. So that's why us and also some other manufacturers now develop those features where you can use the RAG system, right, retrieval augmented generation, where you can basically retrieve with voice, with natural means, so to say, questions about what you can do about the car or what things go wrong in the car or how to fix certain things. That's pretty much about the architecture, right? It is the tech behind, and that fuels the experience. And basically, why do you need generative AI in the car? Already told you like about the scalability. That's of course the one thing. The surprise effect, right? I think we have some research scientists here, and you certainly have looked into it, right? Probably that the surprise effect is of course positive in consumer and product interaction, right? If you use something and you know that this thing can surprise you. At a certain point, it can give you unpredictable answers that you didn't know it was capable of. I'm not this kind of scientist, like behavioral scientist or something, but that's a no-brainer that you will want to use it, right? If it's just this whole thing with opening the window, where you get some chances of success of actually opening that window, it's not that exciting, right? But if you can ask some questions, some interesting questions about the world, or even get into some philosophical conversations, or, of course, many users do it, the kind of pseudo-testing, when you want to push the system to its limits, right? I'm not sure like how many of you have tried to push ChatGPT to its limits, asking some kind of tricky questions, right? I've been the first one to do it, right? This one, or DeepSeek. Of course, you've asked DeepSeek questions about, that it's not supposed to answer, because that's interesting to do, and that has to do with the fact that the happiness of usage comes from the surprising and unexpected responses. And this has, I believe, changed the industry of like in-car entertainment, we can call it, or infotainment. Let's call it infotainment, because of course it's also about surprising answers about the user manual, right? It's, oh, how much do you know oh, I didn't know. Oh, that's such a fun response. So all these things actually contribute to the successful end-to-end experience, right? Of course, increasing safety, that's what we've already been through, right? Then making the usual in-car routine a little bit different, right? Because using the car is a routine product, right? It's not a product that you use eventually. I don't know, like travel booking systems, right? You don't use it every day or even every month. You use it again occasionally. So from the product management perspective, the car is the product for which you have certain routines, certain scenarios, and this novelty can kind of shake it a little bit on the one hand, but on the other hand, it can contribute to this routine, making it more smooth. And here we come back to the topic of before, that people today want seamless experiences, right? I think that's been something that lots of brands, both in the car domain and in just consumer electronics domain, have been experimenting with. Emotions, I already talked about positive emotions, so this is the whole thing about the emotional experience, and I think that's huge on the Chinese market, right? Those of you who have tried voice assistants and in general cars on the Chinese market, I feel that the users there, they put even more emphasis in comparison to the Western users, or at least to the European users. For the European users, it's a little bit about fun too, but it's more about reliable experience, controllable experience. You still want to be in control, so this whole surprise effect is secondary to like the controlled experience, and you have to first have this cognitive trust. Only then are you ready to build up. That's about the European users. About the Chinese users, they are super curious. Of course, not everyone. Like, I'm not scientifically generalizing here. I'm basically just sharing with you the experience we've had so far, right, in going with a Chinese brand into a global market. So what we noticed that Chinese users are ready to give up control, both in terms of user experience and in terms of data privacy, or at least data privacy perception, not the data privacy itself, right, for having a more interesting and variable experience, right? Whereas the European users are more into, okay, we have to get the basics right, I have to know how it's done, I have to check it, I have to undo all the toggles if I need to, and then I hit them on again, I have the experience for me, now what have we got here to surprise me? Like, now we can start talking. Both options are fine. I think this whole difference in mentality brings different products to the market, right? In China, the voice assistants are like trying over-compete each other. Like, they have this feature, we have to develop it, and China is very fast. It's like this. Whereas in Europe, it's more about slower done user research. So we try to combine both attitudes, right? We have to be fast and agile, but on the other hand, we do a lot of user research, a lot of it. So we talk to the existing users, to the potential users, to users of competition. Like, we try to basically get this picture of what the users actually want, which is not always easy. No one is going to tell you this. Yes, about the risks and concerns, I will not go a lot into it because, yeah, that's just pretty obvious stuff, right? That you need to be ethical, you need to be transparent, you need to be transparent about where AI is used. And here we come into the topic of AI user experience, right? I think it's been an exciting topic. Like, you have to know where you are using an AI product throughout your journey. On the other hand, of course, it's more vulnerability of the brand, right? Like, whenever you get out a Gen AI product, you have to be ready that you do not control it 100% of the times. It does produce some content. Of course, you can guardrail it, you can do a lot of stuff about it, as we also discussed yesterday in some presentations, but it's never 100%. And it's especially difficult for example, product managers, right? Because you have to convince the C-level executives, and the C-level executives will ask you, is it 100% safe? Like, you cannot say yes, because it's not 100%. You are like, it's 99.9% safe, but we have this list of measures. And that's basically what it is all about, right? Trying to make it as safe as possible, trying to make sure that you can mitigate if something goes wrong, and from my experience, it has been you have to involve the different tech and non-tech stakeholders from the very beginning, right? We've worked a lot with legal, with corporate communication, with product marketing, product management, then testing, and of course the development team, right? Everyone has to work together to work out a good system for those types of products and those types of projects too. And of course, the policies are country-specific, which means that if you're a car manufacturer, most probably you are getting cars out there. into the world, right? Like there are a few car manufacturers, I think they are like mono country use. I don't have the statistics here, but I bet most of them want to get out. And once you get out, of course, there are different regulations, especially around AI, especially nowadays, and especially about generative AI. So you have to respect those, and that's why those kind of organization changes necessary in which you have it could be called an AI committee or any kind of the steering committee where people actually help you make the right decisions. So strong AI governance, it basically changes the organization a lot, which means that this whole silo mentality, not okay to go. Here you really, really have to work all together, and it's been a very nice experience for me in our company with legal and all the other stakeholders. And of course, explainable AI practices, right? You don't have to be able to explain every bit of the behavior. You don't have to go into stuff like mechanistic interpretability for those cases, but you need to understand how your tools are working. Because in the end, it's a tool. It's an unpredictable tool in comparison to some other tools, right? But you want to have full control of it. And basically, based on this, how we do it, we pick the case, and then based on certain criteria, which you can see here, we decide if it's a good case for generative AI or if it's not a good case for generative AI. So we still use AI because that's the voice assistant, but then we can do it the old way, this intent-based way, right? Because if the experience has to be very precise, right? For example, navigate me to a cafe, you want the system to do exactly what you want it to do. Now the AI agents come along with this. You can also do lots of stuff, but that is not the purpose of this presentation. So in this presentation, I just wanted to show you that it's not always gold that shines. It's not always that easy. It has lots of negative points, but it is a very important tool, and then you can jump upon it with generative AI or not. And basically working together throughout the teams with the technical and non-technical teams will help you make the right decisions in the voice assistant area. So here is, for example, a table where you can just check the things and then decide, do you want the large language models to help you with this feature, or do you not want it? Do you want it to be done the classical way? Yes, and then of course important is like you've done everything, and then you go to the UATs, right, which is the user acceptance tests. And sometimes in the tests, you can also not test 100% of the cases. It has also been a very interesting discussion with some of the colleagues around testing, right? How it used to be, right? You used to be just testing everything, almost everything in terms of voice, because it's still AI. But now you cannot. You have to pick the cases, and you have to hope, right, that the users will not run into those cases that you haven't covered. That's why developing a new testing approach is important. It does not only change the product management and the development with the generative AI and AI in general, but it does change also the testing approach and how you design the test cases. So that's kind of something that I've learned. It's not only about AI in this sense, but about the voice assistant. So that's where we are standing, and let's see where we are going. That's it for today. So I hope I'm on time. I will be talking later at the SDV at 9:30. Similar stuff, but a little bit of a different angle, so to say. So if you're interested, come and hear some repetition of mine. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, either now or on the ground of the conference, and of course find me on LinkedIn if you want something else to know about the product. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga.
Let's leave this one here.
Thank you. You can stay for the questions.
Starting to escape because I wanted to give this.
That was fascinating. That was very interesting to hear about voice assistant. Before I ask a question, I just wanted to say, people keep talking about Gen AI and what's the killer use case. This is the killer use case in a car, because how better would you use Gen AI than to use in a car where actually you could make use of it for very important functions, but also explore the world. You know, everything else you can perhaps is forced on you, whereas in the car you actually need this, and so voice assistant becomes more important in car than anywhere else, I think.
Yeah, I also, of course, I have this opinion, but it's a biased opinion, right? But
maybe it is biased by me as well, but
exactly. We're all biased here, right? Because it's a car-related conference. But that's true. I mean, I think we've seen a very big thing on the home assistants before, but I would say rather car is now becoming like
it comes across more naturally, I think, the car than like even a phone or in the house.
That's true, and the people are just more prepared, right? Because people just interact with AI on a daily basis now. It was not the case 3 or even 5 or 3 years ago, right? But right now, people are more like primed, so to say, and prepped for this, and then you can just do more exciting cases. But they're also pickier. They are always, like we've talked to users, and it's like, why don't you just do this? I've tried it on ChatGPT, it works. So it's a new paradigm of product management now, which is not only fueled by solution-first approach, but also by market expectations approach.
Fantastic. Any questions?
Yeah, I got a question. So thank you so much for your presentation. I was wondering, from a market need perspective, do you see these features becoming staples or table stakes in a car in the future, or remaining more nice-to-haves to offer?
That's a good question. Like, we are working here mostly with this NIO model, if you've heard about it, right? So it's like delight features, performance features, and must features, and we are doing a lot of analysis on it. So it's basically like we do it on the feature level, right? So we don't take it as a pack all together, because I would say it's kind of standard practice now that you do need a voice assistant in the car. It's almost everywhere, let's say, right, in most of the cars. And then you see how much do you need it to, like how far do you need it to go, depending on the brand principles, I would say. So with our brand principles and with our, so to say, history of the company, that's obvious that you need to go a step further into those delight features, right? But like look at other examples. I don't know if you take Tesla, for example, it does have a voice experience too, but that's a very different kind of voice experience. And as soon as, like there is no right and wrong, I think, as soon as it goes in line with what you as a brand have among your principles, that's all fine. But that's the difficult story, right? That's difficult to understand, and for that you need a lot of user research. That's why, to answer your question, I would say the whole package of this level is a nice to have, rather, but among those there are some must-haves.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Give you time for one more question.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I was very curious when you were showing the first few slides. What does your user research show in terms of how the interface is going to evolve? Because I would imagine that something that is amorphous and within the digital cockpit would probably be a better experience, because you don't have to look at two different interfaces when you're driving or when you're interacting. So I'm very curious what your user research shows.
Like if I understood the question right, like the voice user interface, I think it started with just basically making easier the same things that were already there in the end in the graphical user interface, right? So I don't think it started as an idea of making new stuff possible. I think the original idea was just to facilitating thing. I would call it a facilitator probably, right? It just later, it evolved because, yeah, the natural language, of course, has just a much more powerful tool, and that's what I was talking about. Basically, that's when the shift started, I think, from just a different interface towards the actually emotional experience. Did that cover what you meant, what you wanted, or is it something else?
When you mentioned that, you showed about that head, that interface that sits on the console, right? The one with the emotion. You
mean the emoji? The emoji, right?
The head.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just curious if that is how it's going to stay, or do you see that interface blend into the digital cockpit and it's amorphous, so that you just have one thing that the user can look at and interact?
I see. Well, that's quite a specific thing of NIO, right? I mean, you all know the voice assistants, and they all are mostly just, as we say, talking to the air. But then, as the UX and UI is also evolving, right, there is more and more things happening on the screen. So for NIO, by the way, this kind of interface is not the only we have. We also have the more standard one. Like you can buy a car without that head of Nomi Mate. We call it Nomi Mate. There is also the Nomi Halo, which is just like the light interface. So to answer your question, like yes, of course, it was first developed this way, and then also in China already, not even in Europe, they saw that, okay, but there are people who don't want it to be that emotionally charged. There are people who want a minimalist experience. And when we came to Europe, we noticed that, okay, in Europe, rather more people would have this minimalist experience, right? It's not for everyone, right? It's not for everyone. But what is important, even if you are speaking about blending it with like the normal screens, right? The instrument cluster or the big screen ICS or whatever you call it, depending on the car company, it still has to be clear. It doesn't have to be emotionally charged, but it has to be A, visually appealing. If you see those screaming colors, you're like, oh gosh, no, right? So it has to be visually appealing on the one hand, minimalist enough, depending on your market. In China, less minimalist. In Europe, more minimalist, for example. In the US, you decide. And then the other thing, it has to be clear. It has to be clear what's going on, because if it's not clear, what can happen, you've all been there for sure with some kind of voice assistant, you are talking, but in the same time, the voice assistant is not listening, but also talking, and you're like, oh, and then you start to say, oh, gosh, it doesn't understand me, and then it understands this, oh, sorry, I don't understand you, and you're like, what's going on, right? So it's total anti-phase experience. That's why it has to have a clear UI showing when to talk and when to shut up, so to say, for the system and for the user. I think Claudia, you wanted to.
Would you mind taking the question on the floor later? She just has to sort of run to the other video.
Yeah, just ask later. I have to run to the other presentation. Nice meeting you guys.
Thanks, Olga. Thank you. Our